Who are you and what do you do?
I'm John Storey. I live in Birmingham and I currently work as a theatre support worker at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
When and where did you grow up?
I was born in 1950 and we lived in 119 Langley's Road in Selly Oak until I was about 26, 1976. I attended Bourneville Infant School, Bourneville Junior School, then Selly Oak Boys School, which is now a specialist school, and on to George Dixon Grammar School, and then started work at Cadburys, 1968.
What was it like in the home? Who lived in there with you?
My dad was a sheet metal worker at Cadburys and he worked 5.5-day week on the maintenance. Mother was a trained nurse and she used to do Friday night and Saturday night at the hospital at Selly Oak when it was there. I have a younger brother, Peter. He's 2.5 years younger than me, and a younger sister, Jane, who was born in 1954, so she's 4 years younger than I am. On Saturdays I was largely farmed out to my nan who lived in Witherford Way, and that's where I kind of got the use of damming streams and just generally enjoying myself, allowed to be quite footloose and fancy free. In those days we had 2 television channels, BBC One and ATV, and it was great fun trying to retune it because some of the television turned off on a Saturday. Dad was at work. It was a good home to work for. You know, I don't think we were ever poor, if you understand what I mean. We had a good life. It wasn't difficult to find things. I think they had difficulty sometimes making ends meet with all the, costs of school uniforms and shoes and whatever. I had an enjoyable time also doing Cubs and Scouts. First Bourneville, 100th Birmingham. That was a thing to do. In Laurel Grove on Bourneville, I can remember that. Those are some of the good times. I learnt to cook and fend for myself a fair bit there, because with me going off down to Nan's to be looked after and my brother and sister off elsewhere, mother having worked nights, she might have done dinner but the washing up got left to me. I didn't mind. It was something to do. But, there wasn't much on the black and white televisions on those Sunday afternoons.
Do you remember the names of any of the people that you were in the Scouts with?
No, unfortunately I never kept in touch with them, but I know I was in the Kestrel platoon. I'm sure the name Hanks or Hankins rings a bell. He lived on Linden Road, almost opposite the factory, Cadbury's factory, just a little bit up there, and his back garden backed onto Laurel Grove, but never had much contact with people after that. It seems as I have, all through my life, had a period of time with people, and when it's finished I've left them behind and moved on and never really kept in touch with them. The only thing I suppose that's been a continuity all the way through has actually been South Birmingham Radio Society, because it's always spanned the period of time that I've been around. I've never left it. I've gone away from it and come back, but never really left it. Whereas other places, yes, I leave and go. Dad was an only child. He was a rarity. I mean, he had, I believe, another sibling who died at childbirth, and Nan wasn't able to have any more kids after that. So he was quite an insular person, really, brought up as someone who was a bit special. But he got on well. We had several holidays away that I can remember. The first ones that come to mind were the chalets at Dunster, which are still there. We'd go to platform 13 at Snow Hill Station in the days of steam, get into the last 2 coaches, inevitably reserved spaces. We'd go down to Taunton and the last 2 were dropped off, and then they'd actually be shunted round to what is now the North Somerset Railway from Bishop's Lydiate. They'd take us round through Blue Anchor Bay, Watchet to Dunster, which went on then to Minehead where Butlins is. We'd get off and walk through the lanes and we'd have a holiday chalet there. No toilets, there was a toilet block. Some running water but not a lot. And one thing I can remember was that we were having to make do in a wooden shack, but Dad had caught some hermit crabs and put them into a bucket so he could use them as bait for other fishing, and at night they'd be scurrying round and round and round and round in the bucket making a noise, and we'd always wonder what the blooming heck they were till we realised. You can imagine what it's like running a shell round there. Afterwards we'd, because Dad passed his driving test then in an old Austin 10, I even remember the registration, EOM 462, great car. And we'd go to Llanbedr and Pensarn, Llandanag, just south of Harlech. There were chalets there. And then a couple of years, when I was old enough and on a motorbike, I'd actually take my motorbike there, which was great fun. It was a laugh. Cold and wet, but the holidays were great fun. I learnt to do a bit of sailing and canoeing there, and that's one of the things I enjoyed.
Your father, you say your father worked at Cadburys as a sheet metal worker. What do you know? What he was involved? What he did? Who he worked with?
He started off when he was 15 as an apprentice in 1933, through for 5 years. So that would have taken him through to just before the war. He was allowed to finish his apprenticeship, and at 1940-41 he was called up, but he was a conscientious objector and classed as a non-combatant, and he ended up building army camps, roads and all sorts in the Savernake Forest around Salisbury Plain. 4 years at Bulford Army Camp, he told me. Quite boring, living in tents, living in nissen huts, just doing. We've got his old paperwork on him within the army, and some of it's quite interesting to go through, where they were weekly given injections. We don't know what they were for, but he refused them, and it was written in red in his paybook. That was fun. But towards the end of the war, he told me that 1944, March, April time, the whole of the south of England just closed down. Bump. One of those few times I actually got a chance to speak to him about that, because he kept it well to himself. And he said he ended up in a feeding station in Southampton Docks. They'd feed the troops coming in, largely Americans, ship them off onto the boats, clean down, feed the next lot, ship them off onto the boats. And as a conscientious objector, I think he felt that he was sending a lot of them off to their death, because he never saw them coming back. During that time he met my mother. She was a nurse at Gloucester Royal Hospital, trained there, along with her 2 sisters, as I recall. And he met her because he was driving ambulances to do with the Friends Ambulance Unit, which was something he'd moved into. They got married in 45, and he was offered retraining post-war, but never took it. Went back to being someone in the just a sheet metal worker at Cadburys. One of the jobs he had done, Cadburys had a building called Q Block. It was where all the printing and the boxes and all sorts are done. There are 1 or 2 postcards showing it. And one of his jobs as an apprentice come for journeyman was actually to make all the air conditioning and the central heating for that. That building later on during the Second World War was taken over by Lucas, where they made allegedly wings for mosquitoes, and those were wooden, glued together, and you can imagine the smell of the horse glue needing to be exchanged from that kind of thing. Building is now demolished and is now a car park with an IT centre on it, but the foundations are still there. And as I left school at 68 and went to Cadburys in their architect's office, there's a continuation of my grandparents' story, my grandparents' herring, my dad, myself and my brother all having worked at Cadburys. So there were 3 generations that passed through that place, all gained experience of that.
You know what sort of jobs people had in your street? What did they do?
We lived at 119 Langley's Road. It's a very short section of the road opposite now the Acorns, where the children's place is. And ours was the second house on the right. And the first house, Tom Freer moved into there. He was the Lord Mayor's chauffeur. So we would actually have the Rolls-Royce LOM1 parked outside the front of the house. Very palatial. Tom used to drive an FX3 taxi. They're worth looking up on the internet. Real box thing, but great fun. In there, one of the houses Mr. Kennedy had, and he had a penchant for the early Skoda cars, you know, ones which have since then got better, but I mean, he enjoyed his Skoda car with the rear-wheel drive. I think they were very much a copy of the old Renault Dauphine, rear engine, rear-wheel drive. There was a guy who lived next door, and I can't remember his name. He used to be a very, very good painter, and he used to give us his paintings, and I know that we have somewhere, because they went to my sister, they were bequeathed to her, 4 of his watercolours, really rather nice, but I can't remember. As I say, Tom used to be Lord Mayor's chauffeur. Mr. Lewis across the road was a shopkeeper, sweets and newsagent and things. End house next to us was actually part of Selly Oak Colleges. It was a place where various tutors and people used to live. Round the corner were the Hollands. She used to walk us to school. She was an older girl. And I can't for the life of me remember some of the others. Further down the road, there was a couple of lads I knew. I think David Bevington, and down at the very bottom, Ian Paxton. Met Ian way, way later on, because he'd actually trained as a pharmacist, and he was the pharmacist at West Heath, where we ended up living together, you know, my wife and I, when we were there. So, you know, that's the only person I'd met from my school childhood. But, you know, beyond that then was College Walk with the missionary guest house. So people from all over the country all over the world would come and live. So, you know, I met people from all races from my school age of 5, because we'd all go off down to Bourneville School together, you know.
Do you remember when you grew up, when you were going to be big? Can you remember what you wanted to be when you were an adult?
I had aspirations of actually being a handicraft teacher, following on from my interest and my dad's training, if you like, in use of tools. But I never got the qualifications that were suitable to let me into college to do it. I wasn't particularly astute at doing exams and things. They weren't really for me, so most of my stuff was just practical knowledge, getting on and doing and learning the skills of the use of my hands. As I say, my first job was an architect's draftsman at Cadburys in '68, because I did engineering drawing, part of wanting to be a handicraft teacher. They made me redundant in the December before I was 21 in the January, because they were closing the office. I then went into their insurance office and transferred, rather than paying me any money, as redundancy. Wouldn't have been a lot, but it was good fun. And then spent 2 years, so 4.5, 5 years at Cadburys, you know, till I was early 20s. But all in all, you know, I learnt to drive, thanks Dad. Learnt to ride a push bike. My first bike was a motorbike, was a Royal Enfield, bought by my dad for a £5, and he used to repair it. But what he did was he showed me how to do it so I could fix it, which was very, very good. And we were still living in Langley's Road, and there was a veranda at the side, drive round the side, pop the bike in there, you know, safely out the way. Nice cottagey house. It would have been a great location for amateur radio, top of a hill, with views all round. And from our back window, my brother and I, because we shared a back bedroom window, looking north, we could actually see where I now work, the QE. All right, it's the old hospital and the university, and the new one's been built since, but, you know, had that view of that forever.